So another Patreon Q&A. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support. I want to thank also PathSet for donating his commercial collections to the monthly giveaways we have on Discord. If you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord for monthly giveaways, challenges, and the lovely community. If you are not a Patreon, come join our community on Patreon and on Discord. Again, lots of extra content, giveaways, challenges, and more. Let's start with the Q&A. The first question is coming from ChipSuite G. Hi, using matrix sequencers, people use them a lot it seems, but I can't wrap my head around them. So I spoke with you about this, and you meant something like Bene in VCVREC, this is from DBs, or René from Make Noise. I guess it's called the Cartesian sequencer. Yes, and in VCV we have also the grid sequencer from JW, which is also quite interesting. Basically, the main idea is that you have a trigger input for different directions. So for example, on Bene, you have a trigger for the x-axis, right? So it will move like this. And you have also for the y, right? So it will move like this. On the grid sequencer, we have a few more. We have forward, backward, down, and up, and random, and repeat. So basically, you can create all sorts of different interesting sequences just by triggering the different inputs, right? So here I have an example. I'm just using the FM operator for this as the voice, right? If I clock, for example, now the forward input, right? In the case of the JW sequencer, the grid sequencer, it will move forward. I can also click on the arrows. So if I click down, right, so I have different variations. I can use a clock divider for this. If I clock division, sorry, if I use a division of 16, for example, right? So you have basically different variations. We have also the random input. So if I trigger the random, or if I click it, for example, it will just jump to a different step. Right, so if I trigger it again, right, it will just jump to a different step, and the repetition will basically just repeat the step. Right, so like this we can really create different and interesting sequences. Of course, when you start adding probability to everything or randomness, you also can get really interesting results. Right, so if, for example, I trigger, let's say, the forward, right? And already built in this grid sequencer, we have probability per step, right? So I can change the probability of the steps. Let's do this for a few. Right? And then I can use something like chances, which is a Bernoulli gate, basically adding probability to the incoming gates, or triggers in this case, and I can trigger the down arrow. I have here some, maybe I will take the delay out for a second. Right, I can have also probability, so it will jump to a random step. Right, and create all sorts of different interesting sequences. Right, so again, basically, you have different inputs for the different directions, and you can trigger the different directions and move like this in the sequence, which is quite fun. In the case of Bene, here I have it with the expander as well. If I trigger, for example, the x-axis, it will actually move through the whole sequence from left to right. Right? Just like this. If I trigger the Y, right, so I can, for example, again use a clock division for this. Right, I can also change the direction. And I can also use the notes from just the first row, for example. Right, if I do this. Right, so again, lots of fun, lots of things to experiment with. You can create all sorts of different interesting sequences just by triggering the different directions, and that's it. The next one is from Marcel. Hi Marcel, this is not a question regarding tips and tricks, but might be interesting for others as well. Could you share some modular artists who you think we should check out? So I have here a few that I chose. The first one, of course, there are links in the description. The first one is Pierre. If you work with VCV, you know Pierre. He designed many modules and also redesigned all of the VCV, the so-called fundamental collection. So he's not just a great designer, but also a great musician and also a great synthesist. So you should definitely check out. I really like this album, the Archaic Waves 3. So definitely check it out. The next one is Raphael Zifrid, I guess. He plays piano, but he also has a modular system that he uses with the piano. And this album is just beautiful, really. Definitely check it out. Piano, also strings in this case, and modular. The next one is Polypos. Maybe you know Polypos. This album, specifically hyper incandescent. This was released on DIN. I think, I don't know, this album has everything that's good about modular, I guess, about eurorack, about modular. It has blips and bloops and music and chords and progressions and melodies and textures. It has basically everything. Really a great album. And the next one, I'm sure you know Helen Fogelsinger, but maybe you don't, and you will be surprised because it's amazing. This album, Reminiscence, Helen Fogelsinger or Singer, just beautiful. Arps, progressions, very musical. You can see she has many modules. She performs everything live, which I really like. Also Polypos and also Pierre, I believe. Yes. So really beautiful stuff. I hope you will like it. Again, links in the description. The next one is from Eric. Hi Eric, I like to make music that develops slowly through small adjustments in the sequences used, pitch, gate and modulation, like in Minimal Music by Steve Reich and the early Philip Glass. A good example of this with the modular synth is the work of Caterina Barbieri. Indeed, like in this performance, I will put a link to this performance in the description. Do you have any tips for doing this in a generative VCV patch? So Caterina Barbieri basically plays everything live. She changes sequences and stuff like this. But there are a few things you can try in VCV. For example, here I have the phrase sequencer from Impromptu, and I have 16 different sequences. You can see 1, 2, each of them. Right, there is a sort of a progression. Each of them is a bit less, a bit more. And now to advance between them in a generative way, I'm going to use, again, chances, a Bernoulli gate, basically probability. So there is a chance that the sequence will continue. There is a chance it will play again, or it will advance to the next one. Right, so you can do this more or less in a generative way. This will go to the sequencer input. And I just have to, of course, run. Right? So sometimes it will advance, sometimes not. Right, and so on and so forth. Like this, you can create something that will run by itself, basically. But there are a few more modules you can use. For example, Proteus from Seaside Modular. I believe I made a video all about it. There's a patch from scratch video with the sequencer. It has the density control, which you can change and use to make the sequences more dense, basically. Now, you can use it for pitch. You can also use it for modulation, of course. But basically like this, if you modulate it in a generative way, right, with probability or with something random, you can create something that will change intensity over time. Right? So just by changing the density, right, you can create something that will evolve over time. The same with Scanner Darkly's Orca's Heart. In this case, you have 4 sequences, which is quite cool. You have the space control. So the more space you have, the less notes, right? And also here you have also modulation outputs. I believe it will run by itself. Let's see. Maybe not. Let's clock it. I have to set a gate. Never mind. Yeah, right. So the more space, the less notes you will get. And it has, of course, a CV input. Right, and when you have no space, right, and all of this again you can modulate and change in a generative way with random sources, with stuff with probability and stuff like this, and create something that evolves generatively. The next one is from Andre. I have a question that has to do with arrangement composition. I often have difficulty going from a generative patch to a finished version with a set duration for posting on SoundCloud, submitting to a conference, festival, etc. Do you have tips for bridging the gap between generative open composition and a more linear fixed media version? I have 2 things to say about this. So first of all, I believe in performing the patch live with your hands. It can be simple as controlling faders, bringing voices in and out, even if they are generative voices. So bringing voices in and out, it can be filters. I love using low-pass filters to bring voices in and out. So there is change in level, but also in timbre. And you can create really places or times with more intensity or less intensity. It can be, like we saw in the last question, it can be controlling intensity of sequences, even if they are generative. So I believe in using your hands. It can be the mouse. You can create microcontrollers with PatchMaster. We'll see this, I think, also later on. Or you can use a MIDI controller. There are affordable MIDI controllers like the Nano Control 2 from Korg, for example. It's small. It has faders, knobs, buttons. Use your hands to perform the patch, even if it's generative. And think of an arc. Think of how you want to begin it, how you want to end it. Allow yourself some space for improvising, and just perform the patch while you record it, of course. And this way it will have a beginning and end, and it will be a set duration of time. And it will be a bit more alive than just recording a generative patch. Although this is also okay if you have a generative patch that is running by itself. You can just fade it in and fade it out, and that's it, if it fits the song, if it fits the music. But I really believe in live performing patches, performing the music, just like you would if you were playing a guitar or a piano. So this is the first thing I recommend. The second one, which I'm not doing a lot because it's not for me. I don't like the workflow, but it works for so many people. It can work for you as well. Multi-track record everything. Just let the patch play, multi-track record it, and then edit and arrange it later in a DAW. You can multi-track record it within VCV-Rack if you don't have VCV Pro, and then load it in your DAW. If you have VCV Pro, you can record it directly into your DAW, multi-track record it. So you have the different tracks, and then arrange everything. You can create automations. You can create all sorts of different things. You can chop things and create something a bit more repetitive. And then like this, you can arrange the generative patch and create something a bit more, how did you call it? A fixed media version of it. So first of all, try and perform it live. If this workflow works for you and you feel inspired by it, go for it. If not, try multi-track, record everything and arrange everything in a DAW. It doesn't have to be something fancy like Ableton or Bitwig. You can arrange things in Reaper. There are free DAWs out there also that you can use just for arrangement. But in any way, I don't think there is a magic button or something that you can press and it will do it for you. I don't think there is a shortcut. It takes work, it takes practice also. But you have to start with something and see what inspires you and just go for it. And that's it. The next one is from Dan. Hi Dan, I have a question about mixers. I've seen videos where you use modular mixing, like the bus modules from Glue the Giant, and others where you use a single module like the MindMeld PatchMaster. For myself, I find myself preferring the modular style because I can keep the level, pan, and send controls right next to my voice, and I don't always have to keep moving to the mixer and back. Are there situations where one approach is better than the other, or is it just a matter of taste? So yes, I guess it's a matter of taste, of a workflow, what your workflow is. I used to use a lot the CF modules for this. And by the way, I just saw that there are new modules released from Quantal Audio. Also a sort of a modular mixer that you can daisy chain and build your own mixer. So I used a lot the CF modules. You can see this in my earlier videos. But since the PatchMaster got released, I use it all the time because it's perfect for me and my workflow. I really prefer it. I don't have to build it all the time. I don't mind going back and forth. I will also usually, if I want panning, for example, usually I will do this inside the chain with something like the stereo strip from Befaco, or with the pen module from Bog Audio, or with X-Fade from VCV. Is it X-Fade or just Fade? Probably just Fade. So I don't mind, and it's perfect. You have built-in filters, you can name the tracks. You have all the sorts of expanders like the send and the EQ. You can color the different tracks as you want. You have groups and everything is already there ready for you to use. For me, for my workflow, I prefer it. If you prefer the modular way, I think it's also okay. I don't see any advantage of using PatchMaster or using a modular mixer other than the workflow and what works for you. So I guess it's okay. Just have a look also at these ones. They are new. Maybe there is something that will work better for you with them. The Daisy Mix collection, Daisy Mix Master, Daisy Mix auxiliary sends, a VU meter, and so on. Cheers. The next one is from Lynn, I guess. I wonder if you can talk about envelope followers. I can't seem to grasp what they do and when to use them. All right. So an envelope follower will basically follow the amplitude envelope, the volume of an incoming signal. Here I have a sequence, never mind now how it sounds like. It's more important how it looks like, okay? So here's the sequence, the FM operator going through some delay, and this is the actual waveform. This is the audio, basically, that will come out. Now you can see if I zoom in, you can see the level, the actual volume, the amplitude of the signal, right? Which is this, right? And this is the amplitude envelope. Maybe I can freeze it. Let's see if it will work. No, never mind. But this is the amplitude, right? You see sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. This is the envelope, the amplitude envelope of this signal. So now we can extract it, we can use it for other things, and for this we can use an envelope follower. Here I have the envelope follower from Bog Audio. If I send the actual audio into the envelope follower, we will get, you can see this is the green trace, right? Maybe I can offset it just a bit. We get voltage, we get control voltage, we get a signal that is basically, this is not audio anymore. This is now control voltage, if you will. This is like an envelope. And this is basically the amplitude envelope of this signal, right? You can see it's following exactly the audio, and it will output this voltage as an envelope we can use. Now, what do you do with envelopes? Everything you can do with other envelopes, right? You can control VCAs, you can control filters, you can control all sorts of different things. I will show you a few examples. But first of all, it's important to understand. Again, let's have a look just at the audio. This is now just the audio from the FM operator through a delay. This is how the audio, how the sound will look like. And you can see exactly the envelope, right? It goes up, it goes down. And this is what we will get from the envelope followers that will follow the amplitude, the volume of an incoming signal. Now, what you can do with this? Something I like doing is using it to bring in another layer with noise. So here I have the same sequence, FM operator through a delay. Right? This is the audio. Now, if I send this to an envelope follower, the envelope follower will extract the amplitude envelope of this sound that I can use, again, to open a VCA. For example, in this case, I have noise going through a bandpass filter and a VCA. So if I use this audio, right? If I take out the FM operator, this is now the noise coming in and out according to the amplitude envelope of this FM operator through a delay. Right? So this is something you can do. You can open VCAs. Again, it's just an envelope like any other envelope. Another thing you can do with envelopes is sidechaining or ducking. Right here I have, for example, let's see if I can take it out for a second. Right, I have here the Turing machine triggering a kick drum. Right, and the kick drum has movement in decay and level. You can see exactly the audio here on the scope, and you can see also the envelope. So Tremor 2 has an envelope follower output. You don't need to use an external envelope follower. It has it already built in. Right, now I have here another voice, and let's see why it's not playing. Right? That I want to duck. I want each time the kick plays, I want the volume of this assigned VCO in this case to go down. So I take this envelope. Let's see, I take this envelope and I send it to an inverter. Let's do this. Right, inverter and offset. So I invert it once, right? So now it will go down instead of going up, and I offset it. So now it starts at 10, and each time the kick drum plays, it goes down, and when it goes down, it will duck the signed VCO. right? So again, I took the envelope, the amplitude envelope of the kick drum, I inverted it and offset it up, so it will duck the level through the VCA, it will duck the level of the sine VCO. And again, it will follow the amplitude of the kick drums. So when the decay of the kick drum is longer, the envelope will be longer. When the level is higher, the envelope will be higher, and so on and so forth. Right, so this is another thing you can do. And there is also the classic thing that you can try, and this is always fun, is using the amplitude envelope of acoustic instruments. It can be guitar, it can be drums, for example, like I have here, and use them to bring in an oscillator, for example. So here I have drums. Let's see, I just want to make sure, okay, the gain here is down. All right, so this is the drums. Right, it's a drum loop. And you can see the amplitude envelope here in the with the green trace. Right, and this will bring in, you can see, it will bring in the filter, it will open the filter. And in this case, I'm also using the end of cycle trigger to trigger a sample and hold that will create random notes. Right, so it will also change the notes, but it has nothing to do with the envelope follower. Right? So the filter now follows the amplitude of the drums. Right, so again, this is something you can do. Also use acoustic instruments. I think this is the most common and most fun way of using envelope followers. Just grab something. You can do this just with with your hands and the mic, and you get something really organic that will follow the amplitude of this sound. And that's it. I hope it was helpful. The next one is from the Lark Mage, I guess. I find myself having trouble, compositionally speaking, surrounding filter selection, filter chaining, and performance using filters as instruments. Decisions like using Rescomb on heads or Lopez filters on bass frequencies are reasonably simple, along with their modulations. It's when it comes to considering where, when, and how to modulate parameters within filter chains, especially when sent to effects or manipulated by hand while performing a patch. For clarification, some examples: spacing and target on feline from valley before sent to effects, which outputs of lateralis to use, or switching outputs in the middle of a filter chain, choosing which filters to use in combination with each other, for example, Volt. Okay, two things I have to say about this. First of all, and I know I say it a lot, but many of these things, I think, at least in my opinion, you should not think about when you are composing. And I say this a lot, try and divide your sessions into two different things: practicing and composing. So for in the practicing sessions, you can think, or you should, or you can, or if you want, think about this stuff, which filters to use and how to use them, and chaining and stuff like this. And here comes the second part I want to mention, which is experimentation. When you are practicing, try and experiment as much as you can, and try different things and see what you like and what not. But do this in a different session than when you are composing. Because when you practice and when you try all this stuff, when you think about what outputs I should use from Lateralus, how should I set, or how I like the settings to be on feline, or what different filters work nicely with other filters or other oscillators or other sound sources and stuff like this. When you practice and you do all this stuff, when you go and you have a composition, when you actually work on a track, when you actually build a patch, you will not have to think about this, and it will not confuse you, and it will not stop you and it will not be counterintuitive because you have it already in your head and you don't have to think. You know already from your practicing sessions what you like and what you want to try next time when you compose. And when you are composing, you can concentrate only on composing and building patches and sound design and stuff like this, instead of experimentation, instead of decision making. I think the less decisions you have to make when you compose, the better. I don't know, in my opinion, clearing your head and just intuitively composing and patching, I think it's the best, at least in my opinion, at least for my workflow. So have two different sessions. Have one session when you practice, when you think about things like filters, like settings on filters, like chaining filters. Do this when you practice. And then when you sit down to compose, you will have the tools, you will have the ideas already in your head without having to think about them. And you will be able just to intuitively compose and build a patch and build your tracks. So again, I think the answer here is dividing your time into two different sessions, practicing, experimenting, and then composing. The next one is from Kyle. Hi Kyle, I have a question regarding FM synthesis and to a lesser extent ring modulation. While I have been able to get interesting and pleasant sounds out of both, I always feel like I'm one small knob turn away from turning a nice sound into something dissonant or atonal. I always feel like I'm fighting hard to find anything unique sounding with them that isn't just basically some noisy clanging or whooshing or more basic sounds that could be achieved more simply with another oscillator or voice. I'm wondering if it's just my lack of understanding how FM and RM work, or that they're really more meant for odd atonal sound effect type stuff than anything particularly musical. And maybe just looking for a better understanding of how to use them more efficiently, as my current technique of just turning knobs and seeing what happens doesn't seem to yield as good results as it does elsewhere. Okay, so anyway, when you speak about audio rate modulation, never mind if it's frequency modulation, never mind if it's ring modulation, amplitude modulation, phase modulation, if it's audio rate, always it's all about ratios. Again, never mind if it's FM, RM, AM, PM, all the different MM, all the different audio rate modulation type of sounds or techniques. It's all about ratios if you want to get something musical. I don't like this word because atonal can also be musical, but you know what I mean. If it's a bit more, I don't know how to call it, but you know what I mean. It's all about ratios. This is why, for example, when you see FM operators, FM synthesizers, never mind, I know the FM operator is not really FM, it's phase modulation, never mind, it's still audio rate modulation, and you can see the tuning knob is tuning in ratios and not in hertz, for example, like if you have a different oscillator. Right, so it's all about ratios when you deal with audio rate modulation. If you modulate wave folding at audio rate, if you're modulating filters at audio rate, it's all about ratios. So here I have something, I have here a sequence. Right, basically a sequence, a saw wave going through a filter. Right, and now I'm going to modulate the filter at audio rates. This is also FM because the filter is also frequency control. But instead of modulating the pitch or the frequency of an oscillator, I'm modulating the frequency of the filter again at audio rates. Right, now in this case the pitch, the modulating oscillator is also following the pitch. If I disconnect it, can also be interesting, but you can hear the difference. So first of all, have the oscillators track the same sequence. Right, and again, it's all about ratios. If now, for example, I change the pitch of the modulating oscillator just by a bit, right? All of a sudden, sounds totally weird, but there are sweet spots, and the sweet spots are the ratios. So now, by default, it's tuned to C, or to C4, I believe. If I change this to C3, which is a ratio of 1 to 2, I guess, it will still sound musical. If I change this to C5, which is 2 to 1, still, if I change this just a bit, already we get a different effect, right? So yes, it's all about ratios, and in VCVREC, let me turn this down, I want to show you another thing, but in VCVREC it's quite easy because you can just, right click and see and set exactly the frequency you want. In hardware it's a bit more tricky, but still there are sweet spots that you can tune to. Those are the ratios. And anyway, something that you can try if you have this in your oscillators is sync, oscillator sync. So if I sync, for example, the first oscillator to the modulating oscillator, now they will follow exactly. I can turn the knob, right, and it will still stay musical, just the timbre will change because we are synced, or the modulating oscillator is synced, the frequency is synced to the main oscillator. Right, so like this, now I can use envelopes to modulate this, I can use LFOs, I don't have to worry about exactly tuning to the ratio. Right, and I can choose exactly the timbre I want. Right, so this is always, again, when you deal with audio rate modulation, never mind if it's FM, if it's frequency modulation, if it's ring modulation, if it's amplitude modulation, if it's phase modulation, if it's wave holding modulation, never mind. Always when you deal with audio rate modulation, it's all about the tuning between the modulator and the carrier, or the modulator and the main oscillator like I have here. It's all about the ratios, and try and utilize oscillator sync so it will make it easier for you. You get different effect, but still it will make it easier for you to tune things, basically. The next one is from Starling. Hi. Not sure if you've already covered this, but it'd be great to hear your thoughts on the strengths of AM synthesis, especially where percussion is concerned. And I tend to try both AM and FM synthesis while making percussion to get unusual non-808, 909 synthesized drum textures. I do kind of feel like my results with AM are a bit unpredictable. Maybe I just need more research time, but I don't always feel like I understand what result I'll get from AM, unlike FM, where I can pretty much have an idea of what type of texture I'll end up with given pitch envelopes for the component operators, etc. Also, I tend to work on AM percussion with analog hardware. Do you find software is quite capable of doing AM in a satisfactory way? So I'm not so sure. I don't really have a preference with audio rate modulation when it comes to synthesizing percussions. I don't really do it a lot also. I should experiment more with this. But yes, if you are unsure what results you will get with AM, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, surprises are always good, but yeah, I think more experimentation is needed, of course. So try and experiment more and maybe it will help you. About software, this is something I spoke about before. I think the only advantage, which is in the same time a disadvantage, the only advantage of software is that you can tune your oscillators to exact values. This is, I think, the only advantage, which can be also a disadvantage because then you get clean results and you lose the magic of the sweet spots of hardware, of analog hardware. Yes, so this is, I think, the only advantage slash disadvantage, or the only difference with software, that you can really tune things really accurately. One thing I wanted to show you that is just interesting. It's not really important in this case, but just interesting. Here on the left, I have FM. Have a look at the analyzer on the frequencies. Have a look what happens to the frequencies. Everything is moving, right? Nothing is stable, at least with the so-called exponential or so-called classic exponential FM. Right, we get all sorts of different frequencies everywhere. It becomes really bright. This is FM, but with AM, have a look at the fundamental frequency. It will not move. Never mind what. It will not move, which gives you different results. Again, it's not so important. But have a look at this. I'm moving the modulator. Have a look. Again, this is the fundamental. Right, there will be frequencies going up and down. Unlike with FM, where there are just new frequencies coming, right, all the time. You can see it becomes really dense and really bright sounding. Of course, we cannot hear it now, but you can see that it's really bright sounding. But with AM, it's quite different. You can see they are moving, but the fundamental always stays at the same spot, right, which will give you basically different results. Right, again, it's not really important for this, but I just thought it will be interesting to show you, right, which can be quite cool. And again, maybe it's, I don't know, I guess it's less metallic than FM, maybe. I don't know, just thought it will be interesting to show you. So again, I think in software, the only difference is that you can enter exact values, and the so-called magic of hardware is not really there. I mean, also with the mouse, and also, I mean, it's quantized, right? Unlike with analog that it's infinite, in software or in digital at least, it's quantized. It can be an advantage, it can be a disadvantage, depends how you look at it. Yeah, that's it. So now we have two questions that are more or less the same. The first one is from W42. Did you try the Teletype module ported on VCV, which is quite deep? This plugin is not available in the library yet, but Jakub Ciupinski recently made an interesting video about it. Are you also planning some tutorials on Teletype, like basic usage or composition techniques with it? So first of all, the answer is yes. I plan to at least try it out. I'm clueless when it comes to coding and stuff like this. I'm really clueless. I have no idea even where to start. But I will watch this video. Anyway, all the videos from Jakub are amazing. But this one is a bit, I think it's like an hour long. So I still didn't have time to watch it, but I will watch it. And when it will reach the library, I will at least have it try at least once or twice, just to see if I can, if I can manage the coding and everything. So yes, the answer, I am planning to try it out. The next one, which is related, is from Marcus Barfield. I hope the new year has been good to you. Thank you. I noticed a few new interesting coding style modules, basically already official in the library, and the Teletype in beta, and the older and unavailable prototype for VCV. They are fairly arcane and cryptic to me, but I feel like I should learn and experiment with these types of modules as well. Would love to get your take on these, and wonder if you have already experimented with these tools as of yet. So again, I am planning to try the Teletype. I never tried prototype. I'm clueless. Again, I'm clueless. I have no idea when it comes to coding and stuff like this. I'm clueless. I have zero knowledge. Actually, that's not true. The only coding I'm doing is when I'm building instruments for Descent Sampler, if you know it. I build instruments also for Patreons. So there is a bit of coding there, but it's really nothing too amazing. So I'm really clueless when it comes to coding, but I would love to try it out, at least the Teletype. I'm not so sure about prototype, but I think there is another one got released recently, also for coding. So yes, I hope to give it at least a try and see if I can work with it, and we will see how it goes. So the next one is from Gary. Hi, I'm thinking about adding hardware to my setup and looking at the Neutron, the Behringer Neutron, as a good starting point. I already have a Acoustic Pro I can use with this, as well as a lot of guitar pedals. Oh, nice. I know you've had a Neutron for a while, and would be grateful to see how you set it up with VCV Rack and what you see as any pros or cons that you've come up against. Should add, I have also a Focusrite audio interface which should suit the Neutron too. So first of all, I still have it and I still use it. It's right here on my table. And it's always next to my main computer. I use it quite a lot. I love it, and I love how it sounds. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect synthesizer. I'm looking here because it's here, but I really like how it sounds. I use it a lot. I used it a lot. And I'm still using it. It's a great starting point if you want to start dealing with hardware. If you have the Acoustic Pro and guitar pedals, man, amazing. You can do so much with it. I don't use it with VCV Rack a lot in the sense that I'm sequencing it or something with VCV, but you can do this. It has a MIDI input, so you can send MIDI out of the Focusrite interface if I believe it has a MIDI output, and send it to the Neutron. And then you can sequence it also from VCV Rack. And what I do usually is I send it as audio into VCV Rack and then add plateau on it, for example, or other stuff like distortion, even more distortion, although it has a really nice overdrive. Lots of things you can try with it. Some pros that I see. So I love how it sounds. I like the features it has. I love its delay. I love the overdrive. The delay is very playable. I love playing with it and creating all sorts of different pitch movements. And the delay, again, is very nice. The feedback, you crank up the feedback, you get really interesting sounds. What else? It has a really big patch bay with lots of patch points that you can use and abuse. It's great also for later on when you get more hardware. You can combine it. At one point I had it also in my case, in my eurorack case. It was not too long there because it's quite big and it takes a lot of power, but still you can use it also with eurorack. What else? Some cons. So some people don't like the delay. Because it can get quite noisy and crunchy, and I can understand them. It also takes the high frequencies a bit out, so it makes the sound darker. I personally love it. I really like the sound, but some people don't like it. I think the envelopes are not snappy enough. I wish the attack would be more snappy. But still, you have two envelopes that you can use. And it has no fine-tune knobs. So it has just coarse tuning. It can be sometimes annoying, but actually it's quite easy to tune. It has two oscillators that you just tune with one knob. And I think that's it. That's everything I can think about, because it's quite interesting. It has a slew limiter, sample and hold. Again, the delay and the overdrive I really like, really playable. Yes, it's quite a good, interesting synth. Of course, some people don't like Behringer. But as much as I know, the Neutron is not a clone of anything. It's an original design, which I wish they would make more of. Actually, one more thing, I wish that the Neutron was polyphonic. It's not. You can play two notes at once. I believe it has a few paraphonic modes. I never use it. I use it just as a mono synth. But I wish it would have been polyphonic, because I love how it sounds, and playing chords with it can be quite interesting. So again, just make sure that you understand that it's a monophonic synthesizer. You can play only one voice, one note at a time, which is not a problem if you use something like VCV Rack or a looping pedal. You can loop it and do all sorts of different interesting things. I think it sounds great. I think it's a great starting point for hardware, because you can use it also later on with other synthesizers and other eurorack stuff and all sorts of things. It's quite affordable. I don't know. I really like it. That's it. The next one is from Crypto Techie. Hi. I want to create a probabilistic note sequencer. For example, I want to specify notes and their frequency of use. For example, in a sequence, I want to have 5 Cs, 4 Gs, 3 E flats, 2 B flats, 1 F, 1A. I also want to use Max Slicer, my new favorite. Yes, Max Slicer is amazing. I have done this in Ableton using Stepic, which is a sequencer VST, I believe. You set all the notes in order of frequency from left to right. So the first 5 steps are C, the next 4 steps are G, etc. I then turn on random, which plays all the notes randomly before starting a new random sequence. So this is an important detail. So again, it will play all the notes first, and then it will start a new random sequence. This is something I couldn't achieve. We will speak about this in a second. Is there a way to do this in VCV? I have to string 2 max slicers together and then have a random value generator and switch between the 2 max slicers when the value was above or below 8. And the random value generator would have to not repeat any values until all 16 values were output. Yes, this I couldn't find. I know this is challenging, but I figure I learned a lot in the process. Of course, if there's another sequencer that can already do this instead of Max Slicer, that would be cool also. So I don't think the Max Slicer is the, I don't know, it's not wrong, but it's also not the right Max Slicer to use. I believe the right sequencer to use. I believe, again, because you have to chain them and everything, but something, so the main point here that I couldn't figure out, and maybe someone in the comments can help us, is how to create a random sequence that plays, first of all of the notes, and only then starts a new sequence. So some sort of exclusive mode or something like this, that it plays, first of all, the sequence randomly, all of the notes, and only then it plays randomly a new sequence. This can be great also for the 12 tone technique. So you have the 12 tones, you play them, and then you have a new set. Yes, so for this I couldn't find any solution, but there are 2 sequencers that you can use to create something similar. So for example, the probability key, you can set probability for each note, how much it will play. So for example, you want more C's, right? And you want more G's, right? And you want a bit of E flat, a bit F, a bit B flat. Right, so it will play mostly C, a bit of G, some F, really less E flat and B flat. But again, it will not have a sequence that it will play and not repeat it, and then it will play a new sequence. It will just keep generating randomness. I'm not so sure how to achieve this, to be honest. It sounds really interesting, and I hope someone can help us again in the comments. Another sequencer you can use for this is the phrase sequencer. And basically what you do, you set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 C's, 1, 2, 3, 4 G's, then 3 E flats, then 2 B flats, 1 F, and I guess it was A flat and not A, right? And then you set it to run randomly, basically. So again, you have more chance that C will play, then some chance that G will play, E flat, and so on and so forth. But again, there is no exclusive mode or something similar, which means that it will just basically repeat the notes. I mean, I wish there was, maybe we can make something like this. I can speak with the developer, with Mark, and maybe there can be an option or something in the right-click menu to have a sort of an exclusive mode, which means that it will play the notes randomly, but it will not repeat the notes until it finishes all of the sequence, and then it will start a new sequence, right? So this can be interesting. Maybe there is something to do about this. Yes, so this is the only thing I couldn't find. But other than this, if you want probability, I think the phrase sequencer or the probability key, from Impromptu can help you with this. The next one is coming from Max. Hi Max, maybe it's a redundant question, but I'd like to have some tips to improvise on VCV in live sessions, possibly using a sound like this nice piece from Square Pusher. I will put a link in the description to this. Thank you for the devotion, thank you for your support. So I'm not so sure about the sound. Again, this is definitely not one of my strengths. And to reproduce other people's sound, I'm just bad at this. I'm already apologizing. But I just wanted something fun to do here. And this is something maybe that you can use to create something similar. This is the Auto Break Studio from Vox Glitch, which is a great tool sampler to create all sorts of breaks with it, as you can hear. Right, so you can create something similar, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it's not really this. Again, I'm really bad at recreating sounds of music, other music. But something like this, and then I have some drums with the gate sequencer sequencing the kick and snare from DCV, and I have here a sort of a bass sequence with a sine VCO. Right, but let's concentrate on what I want to show you for improvising. If you can have hands-on, let me just mute this for a second. If you can have a hands-on control, this is of course always better when dealing with VCV or with software anyway. Get yourself a MIDI controller, and then what you can do is you can set macro controls to give you access to multiple parameters at once, right? And you can use something like the mind-meld PatchMaster, where you can have knobs, you can have faders and buttons, and then assign them to multiple parameters. So for example, for this breakbeat, for this, I have it going to a high-pass filter, I have it going through a delay and a reverb, and all of this I can control, I can bring it in, I can open the filter, I can open the width of the delay and open the width of the reverb with one knob, and create and improvise basically, and create different textures, and also create all sorts of different like turnarounds and stuff like this. Right, and create all sorts of drops or whatever. Right, so basically creating macro controllers to help you control multiple parameters at once. Great for improvisation and all sorts of different fun ways to create interest in your sound. The next one is coming from Jay. Hi Jay, can you tell us more about yourself? Obviously you are a very skilled musician, thank you, with many years of experience, but I can't find any more information about you beyond the introduction on your website. What did you do before Modular Synths? Do you have any plans to perform live in front of an audience? This kind of stuff. Nice question, thank you. So first of all, I will put a link in the description to a talk I had with the Colorado Modular Synth Society. It's called Behind the Patch or something like this, and we had a talk about all sorts of different things. Maybe you will find this interesting. It was a long time ago, but still, maybe it was like 3 years ago. But still, maybe you will find it interesting. What I did before Modular Synths, so I started with music. I started as a drummer actually in high school. I played the drums. I learned the drums also with a teacher. It was fun. I love playing the drums. I don't have any drums anymore, but I will one day again because it's really fun. I love drums. So I started off as a drummer. Then somehow I got into electronic music and tried to produce psytrance. I was really bad at it, but I did went to study a bit electronic music and sound design, which was cool back then. We also tried a bit modular with Reactor, but I didn't understand anything back then. It was just I couldn't understand anything. What is clock and whatever? Why you need a clock and stuff like this? I remember this now, but I couldn't understand anything. But we worked with Cubase. I started working with Cubase. I made really bad psytrance music, and then slowly I discovered classical music. I believe it was through the Doors. They have the song Spanish Caravan, which is also a piece, a composition. And this, I think this got me more into classical music. And then I really delved into with Mahler and Beethoven, of course, and everything, and Chopin. And I started learning piano and playing all those different pieces. Not all of them, but some of them. And I started composing for piano. I started learning also guitar more in a classical way. I composed also for guitar a bit, composed with my flute that I played. Actually, I started playing the flute when I was into electronic music because of Spongel, if you know Spongel, and Raja Ram. That's why I wanted to start playing the flute. So I started composing more classically, I guess. And yes, there's also one album actually on my Bandcamp. It's called Reveries. This is 6 piano pieces that I composed and played and recorded and everything, which I'm really proud of. So it will stay there, even though it has nothing to do with Modular. It will stay there on my Bandcamp. Yes, and then I was totally into classical and stuff like this. And then one day I opened Facebook and there was an article about VCVREC from Synthopia. And that's it. And that's where my life changed. And I went back into electronic music and into Modular with VCVREC and then with hardware. Yes, and that was it for me. If I have plans to perform live, so before COVID and everything, I started gathering equipment for going live. I also made a few live sessions on YouTube, which I really enjoyed. But then happened what happened, and no one could go out anywhere. And I think this affected me really a lot. And on the one hand, I really like to perform live. I also have an idea of what I want. And I also know what I need for this. On the other hand, I'm not so sure if I can still. I don't know, mentally, I guess. I don't know. I have to think about this. On one hand, I really want to. On the other hand, I don't want really. So I'm not so sure how to approach this. The thought of me going on stage or something similar to a stage and being the center of attention, this is not something I think I will enjoy so much. So I'm not so sure what to think about this. Although there is a part of me who really wants to do this, I know what and I know how. So we will see. Maybe it will happen, maybe not. For now, I'm making music on my other channel, Modular Fun Guy. If you look for it, there is a lot of music with hardware there. And I continue working with VCVREC. Yeah, and that's it, I guess. The next one is from Aaron. Hi, Aaron. I know you must be quite busy, so I will make the request as short as possible. No worries, I'm here. I'm happy I can be here, and I'm happy I can try at least and be helpful. I apologize if this was already been covered, revamped, and someone spaced it out or just managed to miss it, but would it be possible to remake your take on the Subharmonicon using the PatchMaster modules? So yes, you missed it. Actually, I did. I went back to all of my builds and I built them again with the PatchMaster module. So there is the DFM, there is the Subharmonicon, there is the Mother 32, there is the TB303, there is the O-Coast even, or the No-Coast. Now I added also the Neutron. I have also a few more ideas that I'm working on. And all of them also with the PatchMaster, as you can see here. This is the Subharmonicon. There are the 2 sequencers, the steps that you can choose. Even the quantizer I added, so you can have the 12-tone or the just intonation, I believe I didn't add, or maybe the equal temperament 8 or 12. I didn't add the just intonation. But yes, you have the two oscillators, you have everything here basically, even with the sequencer. So yes, I did it. It's there. I will put a link where you can get it. Everything else is also the DFM, everything that I mentioned. And I'm working on a few more things. The next one is from CP Geisen. Hi. My question is a bit more basic. I found myself in a bit of a rut when building patches. I tend to end up with very similar sounding things. Do you have a suggestion to mix that up a bit? How do you push yourself out of a rut when building patches? Thank you so much for your perspective and for the videos. Thank you for your support. So again, I go back to what we spoke about in the beginning, and I know I say it a lot, but it's important. It's important, and I think it's really helpful. It's not a waste of time. It might feel like it sometimes. Also for me, I say this to myself also. Sometimes when you don't have a definitive result, it might feel like you are wasting your time, but you are not. So again, try and separate your sessions into two different things. One, practice and experimentation, and one, building patches and composing. Right? So again, when you practice, you experiment, you try things. You don't concentrate on, don't overwhelm yourself with the need to build a bigger patch. No. Try different modules, delete them. Try different modules, delete them. Try different combinations, delete them. Build small sort of patchlets, if you will. Experiment with different things. Experiment with different ideas. Find new places you like to explore, new directions you would like to explore. Do all of this when you practice. Don't overwhelm yourself with trying to build a full patch. Don't force yourself to compose. No, just try quickly, or not quickly, but small things, little things that you enjoy. Find new things you can experiment with. Build your box of tools, or fill up your box of tools, or find new tools that you can use. And then when you sit down and you say, okay, I want to now to sit down and compose, or to sit down and build a patch, you don't have to think too much. You have already new ideas you want to try in your head. You have new tools you can use from those practice sessions. And I think it will help you also finding new things, and also, I guess, coming out of this feeling that you repeat yourself, because you have to practice, just like when you practice piano, just like when you practice guitar, just like when you practice your flute or your banjo, never mind. Also Modular is an instrument, also Modular, also eurorack, also VCV rack, you have to practice, or you should, or you can if you want. You don't have to do anything, of course. But you know what I mean. You should practice. And practicing, I think in this case, with Modular, with synthesizers, I think practicing is more about experimentation. And then when you sit down to build a patch, you don't think too much. Everything comes to you intuitively, hopefully, from those practice sessions. Practicing is not a waste of time. And again, I say this to myself also. Sometimes I sit down and I have nothing at the end. I don't have a patch. I don't have a video. I don't have a sound. I don't have anything. And I think to myself, oh, okay, this was a waste of time. But no, this was not a waste of time, because now I have more tools and I tried things. Sometimes I know what I like. Sometimes I find out what I don't like, which is equally as important. So again, I say this a lot, I'm sorry, but this is how it is, and I keep banging the mic. Separate your sessions, have practicing and experimentation, and have composing and building patches. The next one is from Donatas. Hi. If you already covered this topic in one of your videos, my excuses, no worries, but I'm struggling incorporating live instruments into a setup. What are the techniques you use for it? I'm particularly interested what could be fun to do with envelope followers. So the live instruments would contribute to the composition not only by their sound with some reverb, but also with some more interesting approaches. So first of all, have a look at the envelope follower section from before. And also I will put a link. She did it much better than I can, for sure, for a link for a video from Sarah Bell Reed, where she speaks about incorporating acoustic instruments with VCV rack. It's exactly what you want, exactly what you need. And she did an amazing job showing everything. And anyway, she's amazing incorporating her trumpet with Modular and everything. So definitely check it out. I will put a link in the description. So definitely have a look. There is another section to this, again from Kyle. Hi, Kyle. How do you reduce latency from your interface when you use acoustic instruments, I guess? I'm using the Behringer interface, and having major latency issues make it very hard to do anything in time. Okay, so first of all, I have here also TreeMonster that I use recently a lot with my flute. It has an envelope follower output, but also pitch output that you can use to control the pitch of the oscillators. But what I want to show you here, Kyle, if you have a look at your audio module and have a look at the block size, the larger the block size, the larger the latency, basically. You see I have 512. This has a latency of 10.7 milliseconds. In my case, for what I do now is enough for me, but I could go lower if I want to, let's say 5.3 milliseconds or even 2.7. But this means the lower the block size, the harder your computer will work, which means the smaller the patches you could build eventually. So there's compromise, there's compromising there. There's a compromise issue where you will have to set the right block size so you don't have a lot of latency, but not too low, so you can still build patches without crackling and all sorts of different issues. So have a look at your block size. This depends also on your interface. Of course, the better the interface, the better the latency, or the shorter the latency. I have now the Motu interface, the Ultralight 4. I could go lower again, but just because usually I'm also recording videos, so there is also Reaper open, like now, and also OBS. So it adds a lot. If I just build patches without doing anything, without recording them or anything, I can go even lower. But for me, for what I'm doing, that's enough. So have a look at the block size. This might help you. Have a look also in the settings of your interface. You might also be able to change them there. Yes, and I hope this is helpful. The next one is coming from Chris. Hi, Chris. I'm looking for a way to quantize a sequence of CVs to be harmonious with a sequence of polyphonic chords. I'm imagining a module like Quantum, but with the ability to input a polyphonic chord to set the current chord or notes. This could then be used to generate melodies compatible with chord sequences by inputting a sequence of CVs. I'm imagining a module like Aaron Static Random Notes CV, but where the generated notes are not random, but selected out of the current chord by the level of an inputted CV. Is there a module or group of modules that can do this? I know this is something like an arpeggiator. I want more control over the outputted notes. I have something for you. I have two things actually you can try. So first of all, there is the chord key from Impromptu, which will generate chords. It's a chord sequencer or chord generator, just like I have it set here. Right? Right, so it will basically generate chords. And it has an expander that you can use as a quantizer. It's a quantizer expander that you just add to the module, and then you can use it to quantize according to the notes of the chord. So here I have a sequence coming from the Sec3, right, sequencing another FM operator, and the notes are quantized to the chords. Right? So it's the same sequence all the time, but just the quantization is changing according to the chords. I hope this is what you are looking for, but I have another solution which is even better, I believe, for you. So let me mute this, and what I want to say is that you can actually do this with Quantum. So you have, if you like Quantum, then you can use Quantum for this. What you do, Quantum has a polyphonic input, a polyphonic note and toggle or gate inputs that will basically change the selected notes, as you can see here, right? Now again, this has to be polyphonic. So you use your chords. In this case, I'm generating chords with a note sequencer, right? It will be this. Right, and I'm sending the chords to the note input of Quantum. And the gates, in this case, those are triggers. You do need gates. This is why I'm using D gate. So as long as the gate is high, the notes will be selected on Quantum. Right? So again, this is going to the toggle input. the chords are changing, the notes are changing, and the notes on Quantum are changing as well. There is another thing you have to do on Quantum in the right-click menu. You have to change this to polygate mode. By default, it's set to legacy mode. You have to change this to polygate mode for this to work. And then this is exactly what you get. You get a quantizer that will set the specific notes from the incoming chord, and then you can use whatever sequence you want. Right? And I believe this is what you are looking for. So again, polyphonic chords, go to the note input. Polyphonic gates, go to the toggle input. They have to be gates, so as long as the gate is high, the notes will be selected. In the right-click menu, change this to polygate mode, and that's it. And that's it. You have everything set, and you can use this to quantize according to the chords. The next one is from Mr. Hagi. Hi. I've been revisiting some of the old VCV hacks by Jakub Ciupinski. Again, amazing channel, go check it out. And he has this sequencer which looks really good, but the 23-volt switch N+1, which he uses to switch between polyphonic channels, is no longer available in VCV2. Do you know a module that can replace it? So yes, there is a module from Doc B. It's called the P16S, which is exactly this. You input a polyphonic signal, and then you can switch between the signal or the signals. Right, so here again I have exactly what Jakub is doing in the video, is combining a few oct modules to create a sequence and then switches between them. Right, so you can use the P16S to switch between up to 16 different signals, and you can choose how to run between them. It's not exactly the same module, but still this will help you. And you don't even have to use polyphony if you don't want to, because there is a switch that can switch between 16 inputs, which is exactly what you want. This is the switch from Count Modular, 16 to 1. Right, so you don't need to merge and then use a polyphonic switch. You can just use this switch from Count Modular, and again it has different directions. Random, it has even an ADDR mode that you can use a different signal to move between the steps. Right, and like this you can build your own sequences. So the next one is coming from John, I guess. Hi. I wanted to ask you which alternatives or options there are to extract in hardware in the eurorack tones, for example from an arpeggio, to use tones for bass. You showed in VCV how it works with a shift register if you are slowly separating it and lets tones through a sequence arpeggio and it continues to send it on the bass. This is a great trick, but how can you do the same in eurorack? In this thing, there is a shift register, but it works differently than in VCV that one blew, I guess. Or maybe there are even other ways that can extract tones with the shift register to play the bass of a sequence, or that it's the same scale as the sequence. I think you are the only one who can answer. I will try to answer this. I believe that it was not a shift register, but it was a sample and hold, which is more or less the same, but not really, because you have also more sample and hold modules in hardware. So this can work with a sample and hold module. Let me show you this, how you can try this in hardware. Here I have the Max Slicer generating a sequence. Right, and now you want to extract, for example, a bass tone that will harmonize this sequence. So what you do, you send the same sequence, in this case, after the quantizer. You send it to a sample and hold, right? There are many in hardware you can use. And you need somehow to gate or to trigger the sample and hold, to tell the sample and hold when to sample this sequence. Now, here you have to use a different clock. If you use the same clock you use for the sequencer, you will basically get the same notes. You want a different rhythm for the bass. So I'm going to use a clock divided by 5. You can use in hardware a clock divider. You can use a dedicated gate sequencer to gate the sample and hold. You can use random gates for this. Right, but basically now it will sample the sequence, and if I send this to another oscillator, we will get the harmony of this sequence, right? And now all you have to do is take this oscillator down a few octaves, so it will play a bass. So you can use a sample and hold for this. Now there is an issue here. As you can hear, there are also, let me show you this with another example. It can be also higher notes that are too high for a bass voice. Let me show you this here. Here I have the Turing machine generating a random sequence. Right, and again I want to extract the bass notes for this sequence. So I did here exactly the same. The sequence went to sample and hold. I have a clock division triggering the sample and hold, and this is sequencing another oscillator. Right, but again you can hear that it will not stay in the range. This was nice. It will not stay in the range of a bass voice. It will go also up because the sequence itself has a large range. So what you have to do, if you can in hardware, if you have another quantizer you can use, basically what you do is you use an attenuator to attenuate the sequence first, right? So the range will not be so high, but then you will need to use another quantizer because now the whole sequence is basically different, so you have to quantize this again to the same scale if you can, if you have another quantizer, and then you have a bass that will harmonize the sequence basically. Let's listen to this a bit. Right, so I believe it was not, again, it was not a shift register, although a shift register also worked like sample and hold, more or less. It was sample and hold, actually. That's it. Let me know if it works for you. And that was it. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support. Thank you again, PathSet, for donating your commercial collections for the monthly giveaways on the Discord channel. Again, if you are on Patreon, come join us also on Discord. For a lovely community, challenges, all sorts of different fun things. If you are not a Patreon, come join us on Patreon and on Discord for lots and lots of extra content, monthly giveaways, monthly challenges, and all sorts of different interesting and fun things. Thank you again. Cheers.